The first problem with the nervous system, brain and spinal cord, that I want to go over is something called Parkinson's disease. And this is described by uncontrollable body movements. So let me show you Michael J. Fox. He has Parkinson's disease, and the motions that he is going to make during this interview, he cannot control because his brain cannot stop sending these movement signals to his body. So let's take a look.
1980s and made Michael J. Fox a star. More hit movies followed, as did a string of awards for his TV series like Spin City. Now, though, his future's increasingly defined by Parkinson's disease.
As soon as I wake up, I can't go back to sleep. I mean, it starts going. So I would say that's the toughest part in the morning is to kind of go, well, I'm up whether I like it or not, I'm up now. And the other thing that happens to me in the morning, first thing is I get that dystonia, which is kind of cramping, and it can be very extreme.
In a rare interview on ABC, he spoke about the new challenges from something as simple as using a toothbrush.
Because I have to put the brush down on the countertop, hold it flat, and get the bristles on, because if I hold it, I'll miss it. It's a moving target. But then once I get all loaded up, then I just kind of bring it up to my mouth and then just let it go.
Remarkably, he also revealed that ice skating appears to temporarily block his symptoms, but only while he keeps moving. There's no cure for Parkinson's, but Michael J. Fox has been fighting to change that. He's gone from actor to activist.
Okay, so that was a pretty progressed stage of Parkinson's that he has, but nonetheless, you can see those uncontrollable body movements. So let's get into some of the science. You do not have to take notes. You'll just be expected to know this when you take the Google form quiz underneath this video. So let's see, let's go here. Causes. It's 1.5 more likely to occur with men compared to women. There is potentially a hereditary component. It's caused by a lack of dopamine. Remember, dopamine is a neurotransmitter that talks to neurons between the two neurons that never touch each other. And it's in the cerebellum of the brain. So there's not enough dopamine to help with the controlling of the muscles. You might be thinking, well, I thought dopamine was just for a pleasure experience, but it also has another role in muscle movement. Okay, so the people do not lack, or they lack dopamine. In fact, they used to give Parkinson's patients methamphetamines a long time ago to try to boost their dopamine levels in ways that we talked about a few weeks ago. Uncontrollable shaking. Their speech is shaky as well. There is medication that they can take. There is no full cure, but something interesting that I did want to show you is something called deep brain stimulation, where they can stimulate the midbrain and the cerebellum with these external portals, and that can help relieve some of the tremors for the patient. So someone that has Parkinson's disease will have this neuron depiction over here. So a healthy neuron between presynaptic or transmitting and postsynaptic receiving neurons are these red dots of dopamine sending the signal between the two neurons. That is a healthy amount of dopamine. Someone that has Parkinson's disease will have a depleted amount. Depleted means less amount of dopamine between their neurons, resulting in those symptoms such as the tremors, the shaky speech, etc. Okay, the next neurological or nervous system disorder that I want to go over is seizures. You may know someone that has seizures. If they have seizures all the time, called recurrent or reoccurring seizures, that is a condition known as epilepsy. But you can have seizures without being epileptic or have epilepsy. So what it is just crazy neuron firestorms in your brain. You think of storms like an electrical storm with a ton of lightning. It's kind of similar to that, but in your brain. So it's an electrical firestorm in your brain. The electricity is off. They can give someone who has epilepsy or reoccurring seizures anticonvulsion. Convulsion means to move your body uncontrollably. Anticonvulsion drugs. But what I want to highlight for you in this video is what a seizure looks like and basic first aid for a seizure.
Guys, give us some room. He's having a seizure. Give me some towels. Okay. Stay calm. It's going to be fine. Help me get him on his side. All right, listen up, fellas. Before we practice, I want to go over a couple of things. First, I'd like to welcome back Michael. Good to have you back. We all know Michael has epilepsy, and he shared his seizure with us in the game. He has something he wants to say.
Yeah, thank you all for supporting me, and thanks to Coach for knowing what to do. I'm sorry if my seizure scared you guys. It could be scary for me too. But what's even more scary is if people didn't know what to do.
So today, we are going to learn seizure first aid thanks to the Epilepsy Foundation. We're teammates, right? We take care of one another, we count on one another, and when anyone with epilepsy has a seizure in front of you, they're your teammate. And they're counting on you. So, first, stay with him. Okay, stay calm and keep others around you calm and out of the way. Protect him. Keep him safe. It's also important to remember that the person having the seizure should be lying down and that there is nothing harmful in their way. Turn them on their side and support their head so that they're not banging it and so they don't choke. Never put anything in their mouths and do not hold them down. Time the seizure till the very end. Okay. Knowing how long the seizure lasts is important information for the doctors to know. If the seizure lasts more than 5 minutes, call 911. When you see somebody having a seizure, you're going to feel a little powerless. But if you protect them and if you stick with them by their side, you're doing the right thing. Okay? All right, let's practice this.
All right, so that's what a seizure looks like, and that's what you should do. Just remember to keep their head protected, turn them to their side so they don't choke on anything. Don't try to restrain their body. And if your knee-jerk is to call 911, that is what you should do. Do not time it and say, oh, it's been 5 minutes. But in the heat of the moment, with the adrenaline rushing to your brain and your muscles, I think you'll figure that out. So that is a seizure. One thing I think you'll find unique about seizures is their service dogs. People that have seizures can have a service dog that can sense in their body with their electricity, kind of similar to sharks, how they have electroperception. And remember, we have electricity. We have electricity, bioelectricity in our brain and our heart. So these dogs pick up on changes in electricity, like there's going to be lightning soon, if we wanted to do an analogy. So I wanted to show you this brief thing on a dog that is with his epileptic owner and how he helps her.
Extraordinary Dogs is brought to you by Eukanuba, where we believe all dogs are extraordinary. For a woman in Belgium, a dog proved to be nothing short of a lifesaver. Since the Golden Labrador Maybe came to live with Christine at her home in Verregem 8 years ago, the pair have been inseparable. However, Maybe does not just follow Christine everywhere out of habit. She also has an important job to do. Maybe acts as a life-saving early warning system. Over 20 years ago, Christine was diagnosed with epilepsy, meaning she suffers from recurrent and sudden seizures.
Epilepsie heeft mijn leven echt wel heel veel veranderd. In die zin van eerst niet meer uit werken gaan. Dus je verliest je collega's, je sociaal contact. Dan niet meer met een auto rijden. En als ik eens buiten wou en het regende en ik kreeg toen een aanvaltje, dan kon ik daar makkelijk 2-3 uur liggen. Hoewel, neus gebroken, schouder uitgekomen, teen gebroken, pols gebroken, al die dingen.
There is no cure for Christine's condition. Epileptic medication helps keep her seizures under control, but it's maybe who saves her life. And it began around 9 years ago when Christine contacted the Hachiko organization. The foundation trains assistance dogs for people with motor disabilities or those suffering from epilepsy. Caroline Thienpont is one of the co-founders of Hachiko and trains seizure response dogs.
Dogs are able to help people with epilepsy because they can help in some practical ways and prevent dangerous situations. They can do the street work where they prevent people from falling in the middle of the street. They can push an alarm button. They can get medication. They can, if they are alert dog, they can prevent people from falling in dangerous spots or hurting themselves.
Okay, so there you have it. They can either help them with the ins and outs of daily life, or they can be a seizure alert dog. So the next condition that I want to talk to you guys about related to the brain is something called cerebral palsy. Cerebral is related to the brain, and so I'll show you this picture. But before I do, I want to go into what palsy is. Palsy means paralyzed. So someone that is paralyzed, they could be quadriplegic with arms and legs, or paraplegic with just legs. They would be palsied. Cerebral palsy means there's something that is paralyzed in their brain, and it's usually in the motor control regions of the brain. Motor is a scientific name for muscle. Your motor skills are your muscle skills. For example, how do you know you're getting good fine motor skills is when you're in preschool, when you go from needing the big thick crayons and coloring all over the paper to using the thin crayons and coloring in the lines. You have developed your fine motor skills. So motor means muscle. So this is going to be cerebral palsy. And if you guys can see, there's different types of cerebral palsy. The one that affects the entire cerebrum, which is your lobes inside your interior part of your brain. Here, your cerebellum is damaged. So these people have poor balance because if the cerebellum is damaged, the things that it controls are damaged. Or it can be mixed areas of brain damage. So that kind of brings us to the cause. This is going to be brain injury before or after childbirth. So prenatal care, taking care of your body when you're pregnant, or any sort of brain damage during childbirth or after childbirth. Okay, what are some symptoms? Irregular posture. Their body can't be as controlled. Sometimes people that have cerebral palsy will have, if you guys can see right here where my cursor is, this neck rest on their wheelchair, or they'll have these supports on their crutches that they use. I'll go back to that, sorry. Curved spine, so they can't maintain that upright posture. Treatment, there is not a cure, but a physical therapy will help, and a wheelchair will be of assistance as well. One more thing I wanted to show you guys related to this word palsy is something called Bell's palsy. That's when one side of the face temporarily gets paralyzed because some facial nerves have been damaged. This is not a long-term progressive thing that gets worse. It just comes and goes in a person's life. So it's just a different type of paralysis, similar to cerebral paralysis, which is cerebral palsy. You have Bell's palsy. Hello. The next condition that I want to go over is something called multiple sclerosis. Sclerosis means the hardening or the breaking down of a specific tissue. And the way I remember what multiple sclerosis is that MS for multiple sclerosis also is MS for what it affects, your myelin sheath. It breaks down your myelin on your axons. And when your myelination is broken down, the signals that are sent are weak or non-existent. And this broken down myelin is caused when your body's own immune system treats your myelin as a foreign invader. So it's like a civil war in your body. Your antibodies are supposed to break down and kill bacteria that enters your body foreign, but instead it breaks down something that belongs to you, your myelin sheath. So multiple sclerosis is a condition. Now this one affects more women than men, and it breaks down the myelin sheath on your muscle neurons. So these can be controlled in different parts of your brain, and we'll get to that in a second. There's a hereditary component to this, so you can look to see if maybe your grandmother or your mother has it, then you are at risk. Top 3 symptoms: muscle weakness, vision blurring, coordination problems, general fatigue, which means tiredness. There is, at this point, no cure, but there is a host of treatments for the symptoms. So this story that I'm going to show you is a good encapsulation of what MS is, and it's a good personal story.
Joining us again is Dr. Frida Lewis Hall, the Chief Medical Officer of Pfizer. She's here to talk about multiple sclerosis. Welcome back.
Thanks. Always great to be here. And to talk about a disease like MS, which is really a medical mystery. We don't know the cause, there is no cure, and over 2 million people worldwide suffer from MS.
It's a serious illness, and our next guest, Courtney, is a professional dancer who was recently diagnosed. Let's look at her story.
My name is Courtney Galliano. I am 25 years old. I am a professional dancer from So You Think You Can Dance. I've been dancing since I was 3 years old. I love it. I eat, sleep, and breathe dance. One morning, I woke up and couldn't feel my legs. We're trained to push through pain and things that are uncomfortable, so I kind of just ignored it. 6 months later, I had this electricity feeling all the way down to your toes, but again, I didn't really pay any attention to it. Right before Christmas, my right side went numb and I knew something was wrong. So I went and got MRIs of my spine and a brain scan done. My diagnosis was relapse and remitting multiple sclerosis.
Despite having MS, she hasn't hung up her dancing shoes. Please welcome Courtney to the show. Courtney, you're a dancer, you're young, energetic. Were you shocked and surprised when you got the diagnosis?
I was definitely surprised when I got the diagnosis, but when I think about it, my grandmother has primary progressive multiple sclerosis. And when I was younger, I actually used to say to my Mom, I feel like I have sparkles on my arms and my legs. And it was a different feeling than if your, feet fell asleep or something.
Courtney gives us a glance of how difficult it is to diagnose MS. For starters, the symptoms are different from person to person. So, Courtney, can you tell us some of the symptoms that you're experiencing?
I think my biggest symptom that I experience is fatigue. I find that with fatigue, a lot of the other symptoms come into play, like slurred speech, and my balance is sometimes a little off,
In addition to that, though, people who suffer from MS may also experience weakness, dizziness, problems with balance and coordination, loss or challenges with their vision, and depressed mood. And about 50% of people who have MS complain from time to time of poor concentration, difficulty paying attention, and memory loss.
And MS does affect your central nervous system. I'm going to explain why MS causes the problems it does. Because in your brain and in your spinal cord, every single neuron has a job. And the neurons are actually covered with a protective sheath. We call this the myelin sheath. It helps these neurons communicate with one another effectively and efficiently. But in the case of multiple sclerosis, otherwise known as MS, your body's own immune system literally attacks this myelin sheath. And over time, in certain areas of the brain, it destroys that myelin sheath. And when that occurs, and depending upon where that occurs, that's why the symptoms can be so very different for each and every individual.
So you may have a grandparent or someone in your life that is elderly, and they have something called Alzheimer's, named after the scientist who discovered it. And the number one sign that someone has Alzheimer's is something called dementia. That is just usually the loss of brain function. That's what it is. You usually see it when they start losing their ability to remember things, and that's because they are losing brain tissue. On the left, we have a healthy brain full of tissue, and people that have Alzheimer's have less brain tissue, so they can perform less brain functions. So Alzheimer's is the slow loss of brain function. So this is a disease that gets worse with time. There is the death of brain cells that causes there to be literally less matter there. Top 3 symptoms: dementia, which is memory problems, personality changes, not knowing what's happening. Sometimes they might put their car keys in the refrigerator. That's kind of a classic example, but just lost. Okay. Treatments. There is no treatment at this time. So what I'm going to do for the video on this is going to bring it to Tim and Moby with Brain Pop to describe it, because they have actually a pretty good definition of the science behind Alzheimer's.
Huh? Dear Tim and Moby, my grandmother always forgets who I am. Why? From Rekha. It's hard to know exactly what's going on without a doctor's input, but it's possible that your grandmother is suffering from dementia. Dementia is a condition that occurs pretty commonly in older people. It's a decline in brain function, usually as a result of a disease or brain damage. Dementia can have drastic effects on a person's memory, attention, problem-solving ability, and speaking skills. Yeah, it can be a very frustrating thing to live with. It can also take a pretty big toll on friends and relatives. Well, there are a number of causes of dementia, but the most common is Alzheimer's disease. Alzheimer's is a progressive deterioration of the brain. That means it gets worse as time goes by. Usually, it starts with short-term memory loss, things like forgetting something you just did. As it gets worse, it can make a person lose their language skills, their ability to recognize things or people, and even to do simple tasks, like tying shoelaces or using utensils. Oh, Alzheimer's is named after German psychiatrist Alois Alzheimer, who was one of the first people to link dementia with tissue damage in the brain. Scientists now know that a person with Alzheimer's disease loses brain cells, which is why they lose so many of their ordinary abilities. Well, no, as far as doctors know, it's not a normal part of aging. It's kind of hard to know the exact numbers since a lot of people don't get tested, but usually people don't get symptoms until late adulthood. About 5% of Americans will have Alzheimer's by age 65. After age 85, the figures go way up. Up to 40% of people may have the disease at that point. That's about 2 out of every 5 people. Yeah, it's kind of a mystery why certain people get it and not others. Most likely, there are a number of causes. For one thing, there seems to be a genetic component, which means that you're more likely to get it if someone in your family has had it in the past. But the immediate cause is an abnormal buildup of 2 particular substances in the brain. The first is plaque, sticky clumps of protein that accumulate between brain cells. The other culprit is something called tangles. These form when fibers inside brain cells get all twisted up and results in the death of the cells. Basically, plaques and tangles prevent chemical messages from getting through your brain properly. It's these messages that help us think and remember stuff, so that's why people with Alzheimer's have trouble with their memory. I know, it kind of stinks. Unfortunately, there are no proven ways to prevent it, but doctors are working on a vaccine, and they do have some suggestions that may help. One is to keep your brain active. If you read a lot or do mind games like crossword puzzles, you may have a better chance of preventing the disease. Staying social may help too. Interacting with people helps prevent depression, which has been linked to an increased risk of Alzheimer's. Some studies even suggest eating certain spices to prevent the formation of brain plaques. Well, like turmeric, which is found in a lot of Indian foods. Hey, can you pass the chicken vindaloo? I don't know. That one maybe?